West Virginia is one of the most beautiful states in America. Ancient mountains folding into river valleys, mist settling over hollows at dawn, forests so dense and quiet they feel untouched by anything modern. It is the kind of landscape that belongs on postcards and tourism campaigns, and it earns every bit of that reputation. But beneath that beauty, there are places most people will never see. Complete communities where thousands of people once lived full lives. Towns with schools, churches, company stores, and families who believed they were building something permanent. Towns that were abandoned so completely that most West Virginians have never heard their names spoken out loud. These are not the famous ones. These are not Thurmond. These are not Matawan. These are 10 towns that have been almost entirely erased from public memory. And what happened inside them is genuinely disturbing. Some were swallowed by the forest. Some were deliberately destroyed. One lost 91 men in a single afternoon. This list escalates. Each entry is more unsettling than the one before it, and by the time you reach number 1, the silence in these places will sound very different than it does right now. Number 10. O'Keefe, West Virginia, Mingo County. O'Keefe was a coal camp in southern West Virginia that existed for one reason: to serve the mine. Company houses lined the hollow. A small store carried what families needed. Life moved to the rhythm of shift whistles, men descending into the mountain before dawn and surfacing black with dust before supper. It was not a large town, it was not a famous one, but it was a real place where real families built real lives around the only work available to them. When the mine shut down, there was nothing else. No second industry, no fallback employer, no reason for a single family to stay. So they left. Quietly, without ceremony, one household at a time until the hollow was empty. Today, O'Keefe sits in complete silence. Vines have overtaken what structures remain. There are no historical markers, no signs, no indication that anyone ever called this place home. Even the memory of the town has been swallowed. And this is only number 10. Number 9. Hammond, West Virginia, Marion County. Hammond sat near the Tygart River, built around brickworks and coal operations that fed the region's industrial hunger. It was a working town in every sense. Kilns fired through the night. Men hauled material from the riverbank to the yard. Families settled along the water and raised children to the sound of industry at full capacity. When the operations shut down, Hammond did not disappear all at once. It decayed in place. The kilns went cold. The homes emptied one by one. The structures that once housed a functioning community began collapsing into the ground they were built on. Today, only ruins and waterfalls remain. Crumbling foundations sit alongside natural beauty so striking it feels almost intentional, as though the landscape decided to replace what people built with something better. The river still runs. The falls still pour over rock. Everything around Hammond healed. The town itself never did, and that dissonance between what nature reclaimed and what people lost is harder to process than any ruin on its own. Number 8. Bury, West Virginia, Fayette County. Bury was a mining camp deep in the New River Gorge, tucked into backcountry so remote that reaching it today still requires effort. During the coal boom, this narrow hollow housed miners and their families in one of the most isolated settings in the eastern United States. Men worked the seam. Women kept households running on company wages. Children grew up where the nearest real town might as well have been another country. When the mine played out, the camp was abandoned with near total completeness. No gradual decline, no holdouts. The families left and the forest closed behind them. Today, overgrown foundations mark where homes once stood. A moss covers what remains of walls and walkways. And the old mine portals, dark openings cut directly into the rock face, sit in absolute silence. No fencing, no signs, no warnings of any kind. Just open holes in the side of a mountain where men used to walk in every morning and sometimes did not walk back out. That image, an unguarded mine portal in a silent hillside staring back at you, is not one you shake. Number 7. Algoma, West Virginia, McDowell County. Algoma was a classic Southern coalfield company town. Rows of identical houses climbing the hillside, a company store at the center, a church on the ridge, miners whose families had lived in that hollow for generations. It functioned exactly as the company designed it. The mine produced, the company profited. The families stayed because the work stayed. And then mechanization arrived and the math changed overnight. Machines replaced men. Fewer workers meant fewer families. Fewer families meant closed schools, shuttered stores, and empty pews on Sunday morning. The logic was simple and irreversible. Algoma's decline was not unique. It mirrored dozens of towns across McDowell County, a region that once held nearly 100,000 people and today holds fewer than 20,000. The county that produced more coal than anywhere else in America lost 80% of its population in a single lifetime. Algoma is one data point inside that collapse, one hollow among dozens that followed the same quiet, devastating arc. But standing in it, walking past the empty porches in the silent store, you stop feeling like you are looking at a number. You feel the full weight of the pattern. In Number 6, Sewell, West Virginia, Fayette County. Sewell existed to produce one thing, coke. If that word does not mean much to you, it should. Coke is what happens when you seal coal inside massive stone ovens and heat it until every impurity burns away, leaving behind nearly pure carbon fuel. The only substance hot enough to smelt iron into steel. Without coke, there was no steel. Without steel, there was no industrial America. Sewell was one of the communities that made that equation possible. Miners dug coal from the mountain and loaded it into enormous beehive ovens, rounded brick chambers built directly into the hillside. The ovens ran day and night, and the men who fed them lived with their families just up the hollow in company housing. When the steel industry modernized and small coke operations became obsolete, and the mine closed and the town was systematically erased, houses torn down, families scattered, the community dismantled as though it had never been there. But the ovens were too massive to remove. They remain today, enormous brick chambers cracked open by decades of freeze and thaw, with full-grown trees pushing through their floors. The forest is slowly consuming them. Within another generation, they may be completely invisible, and with them, the last proof that Sewell ever existed. Number 5, Spruce, West Virginia, Pocahontas County. Every town on this list so far was abandoned. Spruce was not. It was destroyed on purpose. Spruce was once the highest incorporated town east of the Mississippi, sitting above 3,800 feet in Pocahontas County. Built around a massive logging and pulp mill operation, the town supported hundreds of residents in one of the harshest climates in the eastern United States. Brutal winters, deep snow, months of total isolation. The lumber company built everything: homes, a store, roads, all of the infrastructure for a community that existed solely because the surrounding forest had value. By the mid-1920s, those forests had been clear-cut. Every tree worth taking was gone. When the company decided to leave, they did not simply walk away. They deliberately burned and demolished the structures. Every building they had raised, they destroyed. Not left behind, not transferred, erased. Today, concrete foundations scatter across windswept high-elevation spruce forests. The footprint of the town is visible only if you know exactly where to look. Most people who pass through that stretch of Pocahontas County have no idea a community ever stood beneath their feet. The company that built Spruce made a choice. Rather than leave a town behind, they removed every trace that one had been there. That is not abandonment, that is erasure. It changes how every entry on this list feels. Number 4, Volcano, West Virginia, Wood County, before Texas, before Oklahoma. One of the first commercial oil booms in American history happened right here, in the hills of Wood County, West Virginia. Volcano grew fast on real money. A hotel went up, a post office, restaurants, a meat market, a pumping station feeding oil out of the ground and into an industry that was just beginning to understand its own scale. Workers had steady wages, Families had stability, and the streets had the kind of energy that only exists when people genuinely believe their town is going somewhere permanent. But the oil industry was already shifting. Richer fields in Pennsylvania were pulling investment away, and the companies with real capital were quietly repositioning themselves, even while Volcano's wells still produced. The town was losing ground before the fire ever started. In January of 1879, fire tore through the business district. Kennedy's restaurant burned, the hotel burned, the post office, the meat market, the pumping station, gone in hours. The oil companies that remained had no financial reason to rebuild a town they were already planning to leave. They packed out. Volcano went silent for good. Today, a small museum and gift shop mark the site, for a town that was part of America's first oil boom, a place that deserved a highway marker and a real chapter in the history books. That is all that remains. Number 3. Nuttleburg, West Virginia, Fayette County. There is no road to Nuttleburg. The only way in is on foot, descending into the New River Gorge through forest so dense the canopy blocks the sky. When you reach the bottom, you find machinery so large and so intact it looks like a place that was locked up one afternoon and never reopened. John Nuttall staked his coal claim here in the early 1900s. The gorge walls were nearly vertical, so moving coal out required engineering built into the cliffside. A massive iron tipple with a conveyor system that loaded coal directly onto railroad cars below. When the rail line connected, Nuttleburg became one of the most productive shipping operations in the entire gorge. In the 1920s, Henry Ford leased the operation, seeing potential in the coal for his automobile factories. Even Ford could not make it last. By 1958, the seams were exhausted and the railroad contracts had dried up. The families gathered what they could carry and left. The National Park Service preserves the site today. The tipple still stands. 40 coke ovens are visible in the underbrush. The old conveyor stretches through the forest like a rusted spine. And the safety notice is posted for miners. Gas warnings, ventilation procedures, emergency instructions are still pinned to the walls exactly where they hung the last day anyone worked here. No one came back to take them down. Number 2. Kmore, West Virginia, Fayette County. You have to descend 821 stairs into the New River Gorge just to reach this place. Most West Virginians have never heard of it. Most people who hike the gorge never attempt the full descent. And when you reach the bottom, you find a coal town where everything, the machinery, the buildings, the mine infrastructure, sits exactly where it was the last day this place operated. Kmore opened in 1899. Between 1900 and 1962, miners pulled more than 16 million tons of coal from that single mountain. Every ton was dug by men who lived with their families in company houses directly above the mine. Men who sent their children to the company school, attended the company church, and went back underground each morning knowing that a roof collapse or a gas pocket could end everything without warning. They went down anyway because there was a family waiting for supper. In 1960, a serious fire tore through the site. Too isolated and too damaged to justify rebuilding, the company shut the mine down 2 years later. The families who had spent generations in that gorge gathered what they could and climbed those 821 stairs for the last time. The forest moved in fast. Massive rusted tipples rise out of thick green overgrowth. Mine buildings tilt at steeper angles with each passing year. And the silence at the bottom of that staircase, after 20 minutes of descent surrounded by machinery that has not moved in over 60 years, is not a silence you would call peaceful, and it is the kind that teaches you what abandonment actually sounds like. Number 1. Bartley, West Virginia, McDowell County. Every other town on this list died slowly. Bartley died in a single afternoon. On January 10, 1940, an explosion ripped through the Pond Creek No. 1 mine in Bartley, McDowell County. 91 men were killed, not over weeks of decline, not through a slow unraveling. 91 miners, fathers, sons, brothers, husbands, were alive at the start of their shift and dead before it ended. The blast tore through underground passages with a force that left rescue teams with almost nothing to recover. Wives and mothers gathered at the mine entrance and waited for news that, for 91 families, never improved. In the span of hours, Bartley went from a functioning coal community to a place defined entirely by what it had lost. Children who had woken up that morning with fathers went to bed without them. Women who had packed lunch pails before dawn were identifying remains before dark. A single afternoon rewrote everything that town had ever been. Bartley survived the explosion. People kept living there, kept mining, kept sending men underground because there was no other work and no other choice. But the town never recovered from what that day took from it. And as McDowell County's coal economy collapsed through the following decades, Bartley emptied along with the rest. Today, the mine portals near the disaster site sit in silence. There is no memorial commensurate with the scale of what happened here. No national recognition. 91 men died in one of the deadliest mining disasters in American history. In a town most Americans have never heard of, in a county that has since lost 80% of its population. The silence at Bartley is not the same as the other towns. It is heavier. It carries names. West Virginia is full of places like these, communities that meant everything to the people who lived in them and are now nearly forgotten. They are quiet warnings about what happens when entire towns are built around a single resource and a single company's willingness to stay. When the coal ran out, when the timber was cut, when the oil fields moved on, the companies left, and the people had no choice but to follow. What remains are ruins, foundations, mine portals, and silence. Monuments to lives that were real, that mattered, and that most of America has chosen not to remember. These hollows held families, they held generations, and they deserve more than what silence has given them. If you know an abandoned town in West Virginia that should have its story told, leave it in the comments. And if this kind of history matters to you, subscribe. There is much more to uncover.